Researchers from the universities of Texas and Michigan recently published an extensive study of children who are spanked. The professors detailed how spanking children actually does more harm than good, and in fact generally makes kids more likely to be defiant and aggressive. So Elizabeth Gershoff is the lead author of this study. She's an associate professor of human development and family sciences at the University of Texas. There was Andrew Grogan-Kaler, who is the co-author. He's an associate professor at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. So they did this really extensive study. It was a 5-decade-long study with more than 160,000 children studied. They published this in the April edition of the Journal of Family Psychology. And this is actually the most extensive scientific study with specific regards to spanking, where they don't lump that in with other forms of physical punishment. So what they found was, and I'm sorry, also to clarify, spanking they consider just the open-handed smack of a child's bottom or other extremity. And they found that, generally speaking, the more frequently that a child is spanked, the higher risk that the children have to defy their parents, to become aggressive. They experience different mental and cognitive issues, and as well as antisocial behavior. So Elizabeth Gershoff has this to say. She says, "We found that spanking was associated with unintended detrimental outcomes and was not associated with more immediate or long-term compliance, which are parents' intended outcomes when they discipline their children." So she's basically saying they're not only the kind of psychological trauma that is caused to the kids, but ultimately it doesn't, you know, if you're spanking your kid, it's to get them to stop doing something, and that doesn't work. So really it's 0 for 2 in that regard. What do you think?
I mean, also that thinking where if you have a kid that's being physically aggressive, you're going to show them physical aggression so that they stop it. It's madness.
Yeah.
You know, there's this weird belief, and we see it cross-culturally. It doesn't matter where you grew up, what part of this country you grew up in, that if you don't hit your kids, then you don't love them, that you're not making them feel safe, that you know, they don't feel loved if they're not disciplined.
Yeah.
And
well,
it's
the whole
weird
spare the rod, spoil the child thing, like that is a thing for a reason. People say that it's like tough love, but on another level. Yeah, I mean, it's and like you said, culturally, it's so interesting because it's like, how many stand-up comedians have we seen that talk about that? Like, well, my mom used to whip my ass, and then everyone's like, yeah, me too, haha. But really,
so not funny.
Yeah, I mean, you know, regardless of your moral compass when it comes to this, the fact that this extensive research, 160,000 kids, it proves that it's not as beneficial as we think. So, of course, there's the fact that, you know, like you said, incorporating violence when it comes to punishment, or you know, having that relationship with your kid, it's also something that gets passed down. So it's sort of this
cyclical. They're going to beat their kids if you hit them. Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, it's unbelievable, Joya. And 19 states, I want to point out, we did a report on this, a spanking case in Georgia where a mom actually had to go to school and let the school spank her kid. 19 states in the U.S. have corporal punishment in schools, which means that school administrators, teachers, and principals can also spank your kid, which seems barbaric to me. There was also one behavioral study talking about just the effects of spanking, where a child that's consistently spanked, they typify behavior that's regressive, extended bedwetting, thumb sucking, you know, lots of really negative things happen to the psyche of a kid that's repeatedly hit. Yeah, it's not beyond the realm of understanding to say, if you are teaching a child that conflict resolution or the best way of dealing with conflict is violence. No one, I mean, we have such an issue of violence in this country, domestic violence, violence against women and children. You know, it completely makes sense to me. I think, again, California also has a rule where it is legal to spank a child on the bottom. And I think that when you get that dicey, you get that specific, where if a kid were to say, let's say they go into their school and they say, oh, my mom hit me, and they're like, where? My bottom. They'll be like, well, that's fine. You know, it's weird. Like, what is this bizarre? Protective Services is not going to interfere if you hit your kid on the butt. You smack them on the face, though, or use an instrument, then you might have a problem. But hitting them on the butt is totally fine. Exactly. So, again, so another part of this study that Elizabeth Gershoff says, she says, we are, as a society, think of spanking and physical abuse as distinct behaviors, yet our research shows that spanking is linked with the same negative child outcomes as abuse, just to a slightly lesser degree. We hope that our study can help educate parents about the potential harms of spanking and prompt them to try positive and non-punitive forms of discipline. So again, I think this just highlights, of course, we're not talking about
real intense abuse where, you know, kids are hiding bruises or, you know, they have that kind of psychological trauma. But I think people really do, even in their brain, they separate the two. And I think the more that we acknowledge the fact that, yes, it might be to a lesser degree, but violence is just not the answer when it comes to dealing with your child. So according to this new most recent study, sparing the rod does not, in fact, spoil the child.